Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Friday, October 4th. You may have missed it, but the thing that happened yesterday was I streamed on Thursday because the thing that happened on Wednesday is I thought it was Tuesday and didn't stream at all. Just in generally being so frazzled mentally that I broke my schedule of my normal habits, and that led to me just being stupidly confused. So that's going to create a situation here where there's probably not going to be a ton of news between when I stream Thursday and today Friday, and then there's usually not a ton of news even around the weekend anyways, so we're probably going to have a shorter experience. There is also not a lot I can do to catch up between yesterday's stream and today's stream as far as what I did. Excuse me. I'm making some decent progress in Punch Club, but I'm also 20 episodes into it, so it is approaching somewhere between 12 and 15 hours playing it, and at the end game you really start to run out of things you can do. Now, Punch Club does help you once you get to the end game and max out the cost of buying a skill to 25 skill points. It doesn't go any higher, thank goodness, than 25. Around that same point, if you're actually winning fights, you also potentially are going to get 10 skill points per fight of the big, important Rookie League fights. But it's not really enough help, and it's not drastically improving your odds of winning either. It seems like there is a possibility that you could unlock every single skill point in the game if you just grinded, and my fear is that you're actually going to have to unlock most, if not all, of the skill points in the game. Unlocking moves are kind of forced upon you, but then the moves themselves are not really that useful. And I found out Punch Club fails at its core to as far as being a management game. Once I started to actually look at the numbers that they were presenting, the math doesn't make any sense. It will say something like 1.2 plus 1.3 equals 14, or maybe I'm misreading it and maybe it's 12 plus 13 equals 14. Regardless, it doesn't even matter. That math doesn't make any sense either way. 1 plus 12, 12 plus 13, even averaged out, would just be 12.5. It wouldn't be 14. So there's hidden modifiers in this management game where you're supposed to be looking at the numbers and figuring out what's the best strategy. It just kind of completely fails there. There is some distractions that are really appreciated in Punch Club. If it was just a pure simulator and it was just boxing all the time, no matter what, that would be fairly boring. Although I kind of feel like Punch Club would make a better mobile game, where if your character was just always working out, you would set the schedule once a day and go to the mobile game, and then you'd have to come back on wait timers in real time for the workouts to finish, because you're kind of doing that in Punch Club anyways. Like, it moves at a faster pace, but it's still easy 2-3 minutes of just staring at the screen, not clicking the mouse at all, as your character is working out to raise stats and numbers that don't feel like they change things quite enough. And then when you get into the fights, you may have a whole bunch of different attacks, but you've probably locked into some pretty good attacks early in the game and are just going to stick with that. Constantly I'm running out of energy, so my build is all about just increasing stamina, even though it's supposed to be an agility build. I haven't actually exercised or tried to increase agility in hours and hours. And yeah, a lot of the side quest distractions can be unlocked fairly early in the game, and then they get finished fairly early, and then you're going to just hit this difficulty plateau that I still feel like I'm in. And then the only other things I can say I've been doing is I'm still watching Spy X Family on Hulu, which, yeah, I kind of like it as an anime. I know most people did like it when it came out too. And really it's just kind of an excuse to have a story go on. They don't even really do a great job emphasizing that the father spy versus the mother assassins are actually from different sides of the fight of the two countries. And I'm speculating here, certainly, and so I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not. Why did I just disconnect from YouTube? But it seems like the metaphor in Spy X Family and the ending you would want to have there is that the main child protagonist, Anya, is going to learn a bunch of lessons on how to get the fake mother and fake father to actually be together and happy and not at war with each other. And then she's going to apply those same lessons in her older life to the two warring countries and become potentially a queen of a new unified country, or political leader of some sort, creating world peace. They talk about the idea of world peace quite a bit. That another way you certainly could end it is just admitting that there will never be world peace when you have two countries running massive clandestine spying operations against each other, which is a nice realization to point out in the real world too, is that you're not going to have real peace when you have, say, countries like China and the United States massively spying on each other back and forth. The lack of trust there is just too high. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been doing. I don't know what else. I really didn't have a lot of time to do anything else anyways. YouTube has announced that they're going to make YouTube Shorts less short, which probably is a good move. It was arbitrary to limit it to a minute, and even from day one it definitely felt like you just weren't telling anything of importance in a minute. I don't know if I have ever seen a YouTube short, excluding my own, that has enough information to even get across a single thought in enough detail and depth to satisfy me. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, it feels to me like in a minute you could barely even explain that 1 + 1 = 2. If you literally were just going to make a math short. You could certainly say 1 + 1 = 2 and have a 30-second short. But then, even at that, you probably have 15 extra seconds if you're just going to say that. The current state of most shorts is the looping nonsense of it, which is super annoying. So maybe at 3 minutes, that will convince some, but probably not a lot of people, to make their shorts more substantive and less just trickery. And they said YouTube was also gonna work on their algorithm a little bit better. So for my part, I think when I get around to rebuilding how shorts are automatically made in batches of 5 is my hope, I will probably push my YouTube shorts to be 3 minutes. It's not getting you really watch time either way. So there is a thought there. I'm not 100% sure all the music actually goes a full 3 minutes anyways, so that might be an issue, because it might just go silent. But yeah, I think making the shorts go a full 3 minutes helps me in one specific way and kind of does nothing else in any other way, because I'm not going to try and change it in any other way. It's still going to be just showing Steam pages, but when it shows Steam pages, that will mean that the videos will play for longer as far as the preview videos on the Steam page. So instead of just getting the first minute of those videos, you'll get 3 minutes of those videos. If the videos are less than 3 minutes, it'll start going to other screenshots. But yeah, the other issue is I have noticed, I don't know why it happened. My only guess is that I reduced the wait time too much between making shorts. But I have a lot of YouTube shorts that are scheduled to premiere where the names are just totally wrong. And I don't really have any inclination to fix that, since the vast majority of people don't even comment if the name is wrong in the title. When people do comment, I go back and fix it in those cases. But yeah, there's quite a lot of YouTube shorts that are going to have a title that's one game name, and then the video is going to show a different game name. And yeah, I have no way of really fixing that, and hopefully that will stop being the case. It is very possible that I'm just hitting some YouTube shorts that were made a long time ago. I have like 1100 YouTube shorts to upload right now, and you can only upload about 100 videos a day. So for the next 11 days I need to focus on just cleaning out shorts before I even make any more, and getting those scheduled. And then by that point, you'll be right about the time when I could upload 3-minute shorts. And so we'll see. We'll start over fresh from that point. There's probably some visual thoughts I could try and do and change, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to even begin to commit to trying to do something that I know I'm just going to fail at and add to project debt. I still haven't scheduled any videos as far as pre-recorded footage. Anyways, this chart hadn't changed much since yesterday, so my apathy around it still seems pretty high. It's funny that there still is just this wide gap between the games that people are playing a lot of, either people or bots are playing a lot of, and games that are just brand new or get announced that catch my attention. Still need to work on this chart visuals also. Let's see, and it doesn't seem like too much is changing here. Also, still need to delete some repetitive data on this chart. Yeah. Steam has its turn-based RPG fest going on. Silent Hill 2 we should talk about, since the Metascores seem to be out now. Yeah, I've resolved not to watch Captain Sparkles any further playing the trading card game. Trading card shop. Apparently this card game is a real card game that exists in the real world, and it isn't just something that was made up exclusively for this this game, the video game. I think a new update is coming out for Diablo 4, which might explain the weekend deal. I also spent some time looking at what are the cell phones that have expandable micro SD storage these days, and there's a Sony Xperia that's really expensive, like $1,100, and then there's a Motorola phone that is really cheap. Perhaps too cheap, but maybe not. It did certainly shake me when I saw that I haven't gotten an update since 2022 on my current Samsung phone. And in general, I have kind of thought about leaving Samsung One UI interface. Wonder why I'm ignoring this publisher franchise. Let's investigate that. Sock Pop. Oh yes, I remember Sock Pop. Sock Pop Collective at one point was just flooding the Steam store with games, and it seems like they still are releasing quite a few games, like one per month. Seems like they may have slowed down a little bit. The games were, from what I could tell, extremely small, extremely short, very little low effort being put into them. And clearly this strategy doesn't work well enough, otherwise you'd see other developers do it too. At one time, all the games would just have a number in the lower left corner, implying that you should buy every single game. And a lot of it also, I think it was just trying to create name confusion and search engine optimization for the Steam search engine, which is not likely going to work either. But yeah, I certainly understand why that is there. So, from what I have heard, it's like 91% positive from, I guess, the mainstream critics on Metacritic around Silent Hill 2. So, yeah, the game isn't out for regular people on Steam until the 7th. But yeah, it sounds like it's being received very well. I still think it is very weird that you're effectively having a Silent Hill reboot called Silent Hill 2 for a whole new generation when Silent Hill 1 is just never going to get remade. At the very least, they could have done what they did with Resident Evil and make a lower effort remake of Resident Evil 1 and then put a whole new engine and focus on remaking Resident Evil 2. Still, even in that case, I would like them to use the new engine to remake Resident Evil 1. But yeah, they also tried to reboot Resident Evil multiple times. On the Silent Hill aspect, I'm not sure how many future Silent Hill games really need to be made, whether we'll see a remake of Silent Hill 3 or 4 or 5 or yeah, I'm not even sure there is a 6 or even a 5 really, or even a 4 really. Alright, let's go through the Video Games Chronicles headlines. The UK publication Play Magazine is shutting down after 29 years. I wonder how many video game magazines still exist at this point. There's probably some small ones. And I suppose we are not in an era where you could do fanzines or just small magazines as a non-profit seeking endeavor. You could certainly do online magazines, but even the online's just not getting read. There's just really not that much to say about video games, even on a monthly basis. Like, inherently, if I was to try to take my live streams that I do and squeeze it into some kind of print format, it would just be kind of a yellow pages of here's a page showing off the Steam page of a game. But then as far as actually having something to say is in the form of an editorial, an article, or deep dive, or even news, most of the news in a magazine would be irrelevant by the time the magazine came out. And I don't have the resources to actually do interviews and editorials. I don't have enough opinions to guarantee editorials all the time. The internet has just changed how people ingest information and what kind of information people really want. It does seem like there's going to be some kind of revival, according to the sub-headline. Went through a pivot to digital, a shutdown, and a revival. But apparently the revival happened before this shutdown. They couldn't even stay one more year to have like a 30th anniversary. They probably are getting shut down because there was this desire to do a 30-year anniversary and go big, and I wouldn't be surprised if they couldn't afford that. It is also PlayStation focused, so that may also be part of the problem, is that it's just not open-ended enough. Now, what's funny about this, if they've been going 29 years and they only have 46 issues, that really does speak to, like, speaks to 2 issues a year. It's not a lot. That's not a lot at all. 2 issues a year after, with many years not even having 2 issues. It stopped selling print editions in 2016, briefly became a digital-only publication before shutting down later that year. In 2016. In 2021, Future Witcher the Quiet Player's owner Image Publishing resurrected the magazine as a replacement for the official PlayStation magazine UK. So that was 2021, so it's only really been going about 3 years. That explains why it has so few issues, is that it's just been dead longer than it's been alive. And so it's a kind of a stretch to say after 29 years. That is a real stretch. Certainly also would explain why I don't recognize this magazines. It does also point out that the online internet archive and retro magazines efforts, there's a website, I think it's called retromags.com or something like that, are trying very hard to digitize a lot of these video game focused magazines, because the paper that they're printed on is getting damaged and destroyed with time, and it is just going to be completely lost media otherwise. I'm not sure if the Library of Congress in the United States actually gets 2 copies of every magazine and actually maintains magazines in the same way that they maintain books. So it might very well be lost. On the other hand, even if there were 2 copies of every magazine in the Library of Congress, there's really no desire in the Library of Congress to digitize and make those things easily accessible to society. I suppose you might be able to go to the Library of Congress and look at things, but it's going to be like one person. Where Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't have anything else to say there, so let's just move on. Let's see. Shark Mob's London team is at risk of layoffs after a canceled project. The developer is currently undergoing consultation to determine how much of the London staff will be let go and how to lessen the impact. This is effectively the UK laws forcing them to do that instead of just laying off people like it would happen in the United States. Awesome Knots developer has established a new studio called Orangutan. That's a pretty good name, although it inherently implies that it's going to be more cutesy type games that they make. I doubt I'll ever see a horror game from Orangutan. And I guess that's kind of the problem of picking your business name, is that you have to be incredibly generic in your business name to leave open as many possibilities in the minds of the employees, at least, as far as what kind of games are being made. With a company name like Orangutan and a logo like this, I imagine employees are not going to be suggesting immature horror games, things like that. Let's see. Crafton and Pocket Pair partner to bring Palworld to mobile platforms. That being said, there's also another clone of Palworld, although I'm not sure if it's a direct one-to-one clone of Palworld in the way it plays, that is already out on mobile, at least one. But inherently, I think that clone is closer to Pokemon in what you're actually doing as far as an RPG monster catcher game. The indie publisher Shoreline Games launches to put system-based games on the map. I don't know what they mean by systems-based games. Does that mean automation? Yeah. They say the publisher will champion titles with a very clear narrative through line, which that too doesn't really seem systems based. It almost seems like that's code word for we're going to use AI to make games, and that's the systems they're talking about. Epic Games is going to reduce its royalty fee for developers if they launch on the Epic Games Store first or at the same time before they launch anywhere else, which there might be some legal issues there. And then most of this, I think, is news we talked about on the last stream, so I don't even know why this is coming back up. Iris Studio laying off the staff to ensure Smite 2's long-term success. Devolver Digital launching a Big Fan Games publishing label. Microsoft disconnecting HoloLens 2. The Blizzard book getting read by more people and getting reported on. Blizzard book by Jason Schreier. VR Studio XR Games is placing 72 employees at the risk of redundancy. Again, probably not a US-based company, otherwise I would have just laid them off. Epic is going to let parents restrict and track playtime in Fortnite and Unreal Engine Fortnite, which I assume that's what UEFN is. Xbox has expanded its research division to start talking to game developers instead of only doing surveys to talk to gamers. It still seems like they are acting fairly passively instead of going out and directly talking to and asking developers that they should have the phone numbers in their Rolodexes, their digital contact address books. They should be able to just email everybody in their contacts and say, hey, we want more feedback, we have these specific questions. It is very possible that they're expanding in this way to justify actions they've already decided they're going to do, but it is also very possible that they are somehow slowly getting better about communicating with game devs, which has been a major complaint with a lot of game developers, is that getting games certified, getting into communication with Microsoft and Xbox has been difficult, and we've seen a good handful of game companies say we are just going to release on PlayStation only, or we've seen a lot of games release on PlayStation first, and we've also just heard a lot of complaints that we haven't heard from the other side. The big complaint from the PlayStation side is they demanded censorship, which is bad certainly, but they seem like they are in at least communication there, where Xbox often feels like it just doesn't care. And as a gamer, you probably can feel that too. It's not like there's a ton of smaller single A games, indie games being pushed and promoted to be played on the Xbox. Another argument certainly is this may be a way of them justifying getting rid of the Xbox Series S, which developers don't like the difference between the Series S and the Series X. That there's too much programming, they say, that has to be done. Make sure it works with the Series S when they would rather just have the powerhouse of the Series X. And I definitely could see in the next generation that there shouldn't be a split there. The next Xbox should just be the next Xbox. Maybe there's a disk drive version and a non-disk drive version, but there shouldn't be a streaming version that's weaker than the Pro version. Of course, they also moved too fast by having Series X be capable of like 4K video output and things like that, when it really should have held back on its technological advances until it was affordable to do that with the Series S too. And then we talked about this, which means we probably talked about all of these, and so we can save ourselves a lot of time. Oh, these are GameDeveloper.com articles that we're looking at. Well, that explains why we're seeing all the old stories. Okay, so that means that between the last stream and this stream, there has not been any new news, apparently, from Gamatsu or Video Games Chronicle. And that's somewhat believable. So that means we can jump directly into looking at the new games on Steam, or we could look at the Gaming on Linux news, which I did open up. I guess we'll start with the Gaming on Linux news. I opened it up in the wrong place anyways. And there's not been a lot of stories here. Praise the Emperor, the Warhammer bundle of games for you by is available. So yeah, you can buy a bunch of Warhammer 40k games, some of which are Steam Deck supported, not all. Only 2 of which are actually verified. Hearts of Iron 4 is going to get an expansion pass plus Gotterdammerung DLC, releasing November 14th. Still very rough Gaming on Linux articles, just in that there isn't a picture and screenshot, and I am surprised how much I really miss that. Yeah, I certainly do. Let's see, if I was to lose this line, that's probably a little bit easier to read. And then you have like square bullets here that I could also tweak some more if I was going to fiddle. But yeah. Otherwise I have the custom CSS modified enough to look well enough. Sid Meier's Civilization 7 gets Windows system requirements with Linux and macOS details later. So, yeah. We still very much are in the point where the first operating system that's going to be targeted is going to be Windows 10, Windows 11. It still would have to be a lot of adoption before we started seeing Steam hardware surveys where over 50% of people were playing on SteamOS or Linux. And, SteamOS is trying its best to evolve as fast as possible to be a Windows replacement, but it would take a while, a long while. One big issue there is just going to be pre-built computers. What would it really take to get somebody like Alienware to sell pre-built computers with SteamOS on it instead of Windows? Yeah, that would be a major step forward to the idea of Linux becoming the default operating system for computers and gaming, PC gaming. A big part about that too is you really should just dual boot at this point. If SteamOS came out tomorrow and was installable on every kind of pre-built computer you could possibly make, regardless if it had NVIDIA or AMD graphics cards, or Intel versus AMD CPUs, if it just worked perfectly, you still are in a case where a backup Windows install and dual booting is probably a smart move. There's just not that much of a reason otherwise you would limit yourself and lose access to some games. Yeah. If Steam at some point could say 100% of all of our games are playable on Linux because we are either emulating 100% of all the games perfectly, or we are, well, not emulating the games, but running a compatibility layer of Proton perfectly on all of the games, or they're streaming games that from their own servers, which that's probably how it would happen. Is at some point Valve would just say 10% of games can't be played on Linux because it has like some kind of anti-cheat or something, so instead let's just have servers that stream those games running from Windows. That is a possibility, I guess, is one way to close that final gap. But we're not anywhere close to that. Where we are at is Steam Deck SteamOS 3.6.17 beta has been released with another quick fix. It definitely seems like they are not interested in moving to a 3.7 with new features, or a 3.1.8 with new features. So yeah, they kind of are doing major versions, minor versions, and bug fix as far as the third number. And right now it seems like they are focusing on fixing bugs and working towards what probably will be a 3.7 release at some point. They've called this 3.6.17 the end of the line. But yeah, I don't think they're interested so much in adding new features at the moment like they have in the past as far as recording. They really should just focus on getting recording and streaming to work better. They just recently updated it so you could record from your microphone on the Steam Deck while you're recording. You can choose whether talking to your Steam Deck is part of the recording, which as a streamer, obviously if I was going to play something on my Steam Deck and stream it, that fixes a lot of issues. In the theory that I was going to play a game on my Steam Deck, I would have had to plug it into my computer and into like a video capture card, and probably sit in front of my microphone. And so it would just be a very awkward situation in which I would have to try to figure out where I can put the microphone that it's not in the way of the screen looking at the Steam Deck, or I'm looking at this on a monitor and getting more lag. It just is a backup option that's not even a particularly good backup option. It's cheaper than building a whole secondary computer, but yeah, I really haven't played a single game on my Steam Deck, and am really just keeping it for experiments and more Linux things. Yeah. And to that point, I'm thinking about giving away my Nintendo Switch, just because I've got no free time. Anyways, I'm not making footage on my computer, and I'm not playing with the Steam Deck, so it just seems crazy to have a third device. Backward compatibility being announced for the next Nintendo console would be nice before I did it, but it really wouldn't be a big problem. And I imagine I might just get the next Nintendo console in several years down the line to play some of the games I want to play. Of course, like Metroid Prime and stuff like that are games I want to play, but I just don't have time for it. I don't have energy for it. It's a shame. If I could make footage for it, it would be a different thing, but Nintendo won't ever let that happen. The epic roguelike Caves of Quad gets a tutorial beta and price going up soon. And then the Mesa drivers, these are the open source video card drivers. The version 24.2.4 have been released with various bug fixes. No new features. Those are being saved for 24.3. Same thought. It's due out in November 6th. Around November 6th is what they wrote. How do you make that mistake? Maybe they meant to type 2nd and then they changed it to 6th. Of course, it's very inside baseball. Everything that has been updated on the Mesa drivers, and your average gamer on Linux, or Linux user in general, is just going to say, oh, these Mesa drivers have been improved. That's great. You very possibly can't even update Mesa on your build of Linux, and would have to wait until your flavor of Linux gets updated completely. Because you may very well need a newer update on the kernel. My stomach is rumbling here. I'm gonna have to take a break, and then we'll come back and look at all the new games. 6 years after the Kickstarter started, Orphan Age developer studio Black Flag has shut down without a release. Unfortunately, this happens a lot. It doesn't usually get even bothered to be reported on, but yeah, there are a significant number of games on Steam that are abandoned. It's fairly well known that they're abandoned. The comments and reviews say the game has abandoned it. Updates from the developers admit that they've abandoned it. One thing Valve certainly could do is look at that early access tag and either put a warning on games that have been in early access for more than a year, or straight up just kick out games that have been in early access for more than a year. The other thing Valve could certainly do is just make developers pay a trivial fee of, say, even $100 to keep their game listed. Instead of it being in perpetuity, the game is listed for sale. That way you could eliminate a lot of games that have been abandoned, a lot of people that are not going to bother to even spend $100 on a game. And honestly, the $100 is just a made-up amount. It probably should be closer to $1,000 a year. The Unified Linux Wine Game Launcher, which is possibly something you really wouldn't need for the Steam Deck, has its first official release. Other versions of Linux might benefit from it. But because Proton is more of a game-centric modified version of Wine, and it's being updated and run by Valve, using the Unified Linux Wine Game Launcher isn't really needed, I don't think. Although they do say its official release would help Linux desktop and Steam Deck gaming. It's not a launcher in the sense of being an app like Steam, Heroic Games, Lucius Bottles Legendary, and so on. Instead, it's a tool that various apps can use to run Windows games on Linux, acting as a copy of the Steam runtime tools and the Steam Linux runtime that Valve uses for Proton to allow Proton to properly run outside of Steam. So maybe there is some reason why you might want to install this on the Steam Deck. It is a flat pack, so you could install it. It means any app can run games using Proton just like they would from inside Steam, so you can get a good experience with Windows games on Linux, Steam Deck from Epic Games, Good Old Games, Amazon, and various other stores via apps like Heroic, Lucius, and others. So kind of it's a unified backend, and so you still would need a launcher of some sort on top of it. But there's another program that also installs third-party launchers on the Steam Deck, so they might be fairly redundant to have both of those programs installed. And then Pinball Spire is a wonderful reinvention of what pinball can be, according to Gaming on Linux. It, to me, looks like a pinball game, maybe a little bit weirder in its layout and design. Let's see. Each main level in the game acts as a self-contained puzzle for you to solve with the power of pinball. Let's actually see what the trailer shows us then. See if we can get a better understanding of that. So it feels to me like this is somewhat like the Sonic Spinball if you were to speed it up. It also seems like you can accelerate your pinballs and cheat somewhat fireball abilities. Well, that is interesting. It does feel almost like it's a roguelite experience. So yeah, that does certainly catch my attention. It's rated very positively already. Suffice it to say, it's been very hard to justify playing any more pinball on my channel because pinball is just pinball. So putting that twist on it where it's got a little bit of a roguelite element and a little bit of Sonic Spinball on it. Sonic Spinball is kind of a great example of a game that should have been a series, and they just didn't get to that point. Like they could have every year tried to have, well, every few years they could have had a sequel to Sonic Spinball that would have just been, here's some more tables, here's the game a little bit longer, a little bit more complicated. Although inherently that is also the problem with most Sonic games, is that the real length of the game is kind of short if you can really go from beginning to end without dying. If you have infinite lives, you definitely can do that if you're cheating using something like a Game Genie. And then that really only creates a situation where they've made a game that, in most Sonic games, you're supposed to be collecting the Chaos Emeralds by the time you get to the end of the game, and I'm not sure how many players actually ever did that, and I'm pretty sure a lot of players never even really knew that there were Chaos Emeralds to collect. And the game certainly changes when you go into those bonus levels and try and collect the Chaos Emeralds from what Sonic is otherwise. And that kind of thought that you would just play a shorter game over and over again and become a master at it is just not the way games have been created these days. Anyways, I'm gonna take a break here, pause the video, and I'll be back in, say, 10 minutes or so. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah. Now we'll just go through all the games that came out on Steam in the past couple days, which that amount is always massive, so then we'll be done for the stream today, which arguably I think some people would say it wasn't worth waiting the break if you're not interested in looking at the games that came out on Steam. This is of course a more abridged version of what the experience would be if most people were trying to do it themselves, since I do have automations to speed up this whole process. It's also eliminating adult games, or at least doing its very best to do that based on tags, which might be a benefit to some people. Certainly. The Disney Pixel RPG game is about to come out on mobile, and I've pre-registered to install that, and I'm gonna look at it. It probably isn't going to be anything of any question, and honestly I'm trying to rush towards a finishing of the Cardcaptor's Cura game so I can uninstall that. Smash Simulator. You wouldn't just call it Smash Simulator, first of all, but it does. The idea of running around and destroying things was interesting when they called it Blast Core and destruction, although usually Blast Core and destruction games are destroying and demolishing buildings, not just smashing and creating property damage at a smaller scale. There definitely have been games where you've destroyed things. Borderlands is kind of interesting in that you can't just punch or shoot the vending machines, because it kind of is the game where it would make sense to do that. It also makes sense for something like a Duke Nukem game to play that way too, and that you're just destroying and doing a lot of damage. Postal. I don't know if Postal has any kind of system like that either, where you're encouraged to do property damage. Destructible environments were at one time a very big deal, and we have a clicker based on a pumpkin, so we're getting into that season. And apparently at some point here I clicked on something that would have taken me to Steam. Facebook.com/Steam. So we're not going to go any further with that. And thank goodness that Steam does have some limitations there. But that is only built into any link that they have on their website. More than likely they have like probably an Nginx server, a next generation internet network server, or whatever Nginx stands for. Used to be called Apache. You would have a lamp stack in it, in that it would be Linux and then some version of Linux with Apache installed would be the A. Then MySQL for your database, which that has mostly been replaced with MariaDB at this point, and then PHP installed for dynamic web page serving, because with just Apache you would be only hosting regular web pages that are static. You wouldn't be able to say click the follow list and update your status, whether you follow something, or click the wish list and update things. All of that has to be done as a get or post command using PHP that then connects to the database MySQL or um, MariaDB, maybe even MongoDB, some database somewhere. And so they probably still call them LAMP stacks at this point, but almost every software has changed in what LAMP used to stand for. But because of that, you can, with Nginx, say if the base domain is not stored.steampowered or steampowered.com as far as the website, you can present a different page when they click on that link, or change the link really, so it presents a different page to prevent people from clicking and going somewhere else. But inherently, if that concept is the best security, it would make some sense for it to be built into the browser itself and not be independent on how websites make things. Probably should be a case that when you hover over a link, instead of getting one color, like here you're getting a white pointer finger, maybe it should be a yellow pointer finger for caution, just by default, if it's going to take you to a different domain. This Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream is being received very positively. 83% positive. A little surprised by that. So that does create a situation where I might as well just put it on the wish list. Would I really want to play a Sword Art Online game? Probably not, particularly since a lot of these games seem to either be later seasons of Sword Art Online, which I haven't watched and probably won't watch, and or just telling completely different stories and including characters that I just don't recognize at all. In a lot of ways, I would say Sword Art Online is the kind of RPG isekai type story you should watch and play games based on after you've played a master's degree's worth of other RPGs. It would make a lot more sense to play something like Fairy Tail or Dragon Quest games. Black Masses is mostly negative, so I'm going to take it off the follow list. Still haven't done anything with the follow list cleanup either. There is a lot of room today to get some more stuff done. I probably will try and play some more Punch Club and see if I finish that. Probably will try to schedule more YouTube shorts later in the evening. Probably will sit around and watch TV when I really shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, we had a political game. They're not doing a great job of preventing political games from showing up every now and then. Although in fairness, Valve never said that they were going to stop political things. Seems like in general, websites this year have opted to try to just stay silent and not say we're going to block political ads and anything like that, but also not try to be too crazy with it either. Wizard of Legend here is mixed. Wizard of Legend 2. Metal Hellsinger VR. Yep. So we're at the end of the show, and I guess just out of an abundance of caution, because we just want to check this video games chronicle, just head over to Video Games Chronicle news. It might be easier to just click here. So yeah, we'll open up some of these stories here just to see what would even be new. It might be that my macros are missing some stories. Then we'll check out Gamatsu too. Just see if there's any news there either. Yeah, there's not a single new Gamatsu article. And yeah, I don't have anywhere else to really go as far as new news. So this definitely shows the problem of potentially trying to stream every day. Without the bathroom break, this would be just slightly over an hour of a stream at this point. And while that is tempting certainly to have only hour-long streams, the consistency nature of it is not worth it. If anything, there is an argument that if there wasn't just so much news that came out, that there really is an argument to like only stream on Saturdays. If I could do a 3-hour stream on Saturday and cover all the news and all the games that came out on Steam, that would be great, but it's not really the case. Plus that might severely hurt my watch time. And if we were going to compare apples to apples, if it's close to 2 hours every stream and there's 3 streams a week, it would be a 6-hour very long stream on Saturday that would have to happen to replace that. So we do have Metal Gear Solid Delta's difficulty level changing based on the perspective you play in the game. Which I would have to assume that means if your first person perspective, the game maybe is a little bit easier or more difficult than if you're in third person perspective. I'm not sure really if that's what they mean, first person versus third person. It seems like that's what they're talking about, and I've never really thought about whether in general a third person perspective game is easier or more difficult. A lot of it I think comes down to just how well the controls are programmed. If they're programmed well, I don't think you would notice the difference. But yeah, if I think about like Resident Evil 4, it being a third person perspective over the shoulder shooter, it is easier doing that because a lot of people sneak up behind you or from the side and attack you. Whereas if you were in first person perspective in that game and nothing else changed, zombies clearly would sneak up beside you and behind you and attack you, and you wouldn't even notice them. You wouldn't see them, and possibly you wouldn't hear them in a good enough 3D surround scape. So yeah, I would assume third person perspective is probably a little bit easier, and it probably should be the default way most games are played. I can't really think of the last time I played a first person perspective game. I guess Borderlands is first person perspective, and noticeably in Borderlands you have a shield and you take damage all the time, so it just doesn't matter. Plus the AI and enemies are not that smart in Borderlands. Yeah. And I'm really exclusively talking about first person versus third person shooters, not really considering other games. Plenty of like tabletop games and card games are theoretically from first person perspective. I guess I have heard of a couple of games changing the difficulty when you change perspective. It's not a huge thing. Horizon Zero Dawn has been delisted from the Epic Games Store ahead of the remastered release, which it's odd that you would have such a gap there of even minutes between one being delisted and the other one being listed. The Stalker 2 studio has released a 90-minute documentary about finishing the game during the Russian invasion, which is a interesting thought, but also it feels like a kind of depressing documentary to watch. I don't think I would ever want to do that at all. And it does certainly speak to where their minds have to be, which also probably speaks to the fact that Stalker 2 is going to be slightly different from what it would have been had there not been a Russian invasion, and very possibly it's going to be a worse game because of it. It might be a better game, but yeah, when you're distracted with anything, your output of creativity tends to suffer. I certainly can testify to that. Silent Hill 2's remake ending has been streamed on YouTube a week before the game's release. Clips of the stream are circulating on social media, so I guess be aware. I guess there is also probably something different there than the ending in the original game. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea if Silent Hill 2 did have a different ending and pushed it towards a situation where a Silent Hill 3 could be made with the same characters, or just in general better connected to Silent Hill 2, instead of the Silent Hill games being really like Final Fantasy, where the horror games are not really that connected from each release. You could even potentially cycle around and make a Silent Hill 3, then make a Silent Hill 1 as a prequel to Silent Hill 2, and just move the game's numbers around and do something kind of silly there. The Mario plus Rabbids lead and Red Dead Redemption lead designer have formed a new studio. This would be David Solian and Christian Katamesa. Day 4 Night Studios. I feel like this was announced previously though, but maybe not. That would be, if they were Mario and Rabbids working on that, that would be a Ubisoft employee, a former Ubisoft employee, I guess. Whereas Red Dead Redemption would be a former Rockstar employee. And this is a sad statement as far as how do you get your chance to move up in leadership in the video game industry. The sad truth is, it seems like you have to form your own company pretty much, because I don't know if there's ever been a significant amount of news stories of people getting promoted. Every now and then you'll get a new CEO or maybe a vice president getting mentioned as a news press release, but as far as here's a middle manager becoming a upper level manager type announcements, those just don't get reported on it. Now arguably maybe they're not substantive enough to be real news, but yeah, it definitely leaves the feeling that the director or producer of a game has potentially a struggle to go any higher, and if they're being controlled by a big company like Microsoft or Ubisoft, that they may not have a lot of creative control. From Software is increasing its average salary by around 12%. Starting salaries for new graduates will also increase by 15%. I imagine this is not anything other than them slowly raising the price to be more reasonable. Monthly salary from Software for new graduates would be about $1,775, which for the amount of time and work you're on it is probably way too low, particularly since I imagine they are in Tokyo, Japan. $3,000, $4,500 maybe sounds better to me. Yeah, they increased it from 1,775 to 2,000. That's really not a lot, though, when you consider rent is not super cheap in Tokyo. You don't have the ability to really cook for yourself too often in that kind of job, so you're going to be eating out quite a bit, which the alcohol bill on that may be high and the food bill may be high. You won't be paying for a car if you're in Tokyo, likely, but then you'll be commuting, but you'll also be working what is going to be the equivalent of at least 6 days a week worth of hours. It is still very much the case that most people in Japan are not getting paid enough and not getting enough free time to even begin to think about having a family, which, if your society has become so controlled by working yourself to death and capitalism and that just working mentality to the point where you're not getting enough people capable of having kids and moving forward with a home life, well, then you run into the problem of Japan, where people are getting older and older and retiring, and the new generation is not there to replace them. It's an anti-baby boom created almost exclusively from capitalism. And it's not just Japan, that's a lot of Asian countries. Is that we may find that there is as many people in Asian countries at some point as there are Australians in Australia. Very, very, very few, all living in small portions of the land mass. And that hurts the overall world society quite a bit, because you get a lack of culture, a loss of culture there, a loss of creativity, a loss of different ways of thinking. It may help on the pollution aspect to have fewer people, and on the resource wars, lack of resources aspect somewhat, but it doesn't really help that much. So yeah, it would make a lot more sense with the new Japanese government if they mandated a 35-hour work week or something like that, that is would just give a massive amount of free time to the Japanese people to find other things to do with their times, to have a home life, to have a non-work life. Of course, it would also help Japan quite a bit if they decentralized things and didn't have almost everything happening in Tokyo or around Tokyo. They need college towns, is what they need. They need to revitalize these small towns by having jobs and centers of industry in towns outside of Tokyo, and colleges that kids can go to and start new lives outside of the prying eyes of their family. But yeah, I've said that several times. Nobody's heard me, obviously, but it's not worth repeating it too much. Diablo 4 for the PS5 Pro enhanced, said the franchise boss. Rod Ferguson did not indicate when the game or its expansion will support Sony's upgraded console. But Diablo 4 will be on PS4 5 Pro, but we don't know when. So that feels like that's not much of a story, really. The Until Dawn remake ending teases a potential sequel. Which, okay. It does probably make a lot of sense to have a sequel to Until Dawn instead of trying to remake the Dark Pictures anthology, I believe is what they made after that, and those games never got enough promotion to be accepted. Still have some tinkering to do as far as trying to center these images. Of course, I have to find some time to do that. Tencent and the Guillemot family are reportedly considering taking Ubisoft private. It was a couple of weeks ago that an activist investor, is that probably the best way to describe them, put out an open letter claiming, well, I'm not sure if they made this claim, but the claim was made by somebody that Ubisoft was intentionally losing market share value of its stock so that Tencent and the Guillemot family could take the company private. Inherently, it really does come down to a question of either you work for Ubisoft and you're happy for working for the Guillemot family, or you don't. Because the way things are set up, they have enough shares so that they can at least still be in charge of Ubisoft. They've fought off hostile takeover attempts for years. They haven't been making great games, certainly, and so as a gamer we should really decide whether or not we should even care about Ubisoft games, and for the most part I think we have decided that we mostly don't care about Ubisoft games, other than they are a favorite punching bag to complain about every now and then. But yeah, I foresee Ubisoft probably will go private, and it will just be like EA, a company that makes enough money to keep itself around and just be a thorn in the side of the games industry. And I don't believe it will ever be a case where we see companies like EA and Ubisoft go out of business and make room for other releases. And I'm not sure they're really taking up that much room, because I don't think there's that many people these days that are buying a Assassin's Creed game or an EA Sports game instead of buying something else. This is a pretty bad picture too, in that this square, there is a backdrop picture here, and then there's a different backdrop picture here that's slightly different color red. These are probably screens that have not been professionally calibrated and balanced. Yeah. Ubisoft has lost more than half of its market value this year, which, if there was some intentional loss of value there by the Guillemot family and Tencent, that might technically be illegal if you can prove it, but you probably can't really prove it. And if it's unintentional, now would be the time to consider going private. I kind of like to see I'd kind of like to see all companies forced to be private, so companies in general just have to be smaller, more focused in what they're doing. Also would just reduce the nonsense people have to do with accounting to keep their companies looking like they're profitable, just to appease shareholders. Right. And yeah, even with that extra effort, I am still done for this stream. So yeah, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.